Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's bring this thing home.
Let's do it. All right. So now I've been practicing or promising and teasing CJ Carr talk because he is a hot topic of conversation. And I did ask Marcus Freeman about him today during his media call that he had with us. And Carr has been the scout team quarterback so far. He's done some other stuff, though, as well. So, what has the development, what has the role been for CJ Carr so far?
He's rotated on scout team, as is Kenny Minchey has too. So both of those guys have gotten scout team reps, but also reps with the offense. CJ's developing extremely well, right? He's done a good job in terms of what we've asked him to do as the scout team quarterback, but also what he's been able to do with the offense. He studies the game. He's constantly trying to improve, and he's definitely improving.
Splitting reps with Kenny Minchey, sometimes scout team, sometimes getting some third team reps, which means you're not getting a ton of reps. So what do you think of that?
Honestly, I don't even know what to think about all of the quarterback stuff. It's like we're sitting here talking about, what offense is working best for the quarterback skill set. We're talking about whether Angeli should be getting in, and now we're talking about, is CJ Carr developing as much as he should be? I think that on the roster right now, going into, knowing that Riley Leonard has 1 year left, I would say that CJ Carr, in my opinion, would be the quarterback of the future, assuming nothing else changes. And so I would like to see, him overtake Kenny Minchey in some regards and, potentially even get up to the point where he's, going to overtake someone like Steve Angeli. And I don't know if that happens by the end of the season or what, but it goes back to when you think of a Mike Denbrock offense, I think that of Angeli, Minchey, and Carr gives you the best kind of, boom percentage, essentially, right? The guy who's going to run that offense the best and be the most potent in that offense. So I would like to see more CJ Carr development, knowing kind of what is on the brink next season.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot people are with you, and I don't completely disagree with it either. Like sarcastic Redbeard, if CJ Carr is the future, he should be taking a lot of reps, but that's not what he's taking right now. And I guess at least he's getting some third team reps, like running the actual Notre Dame offense. But look, this is what you got, because you've got 4 scholarship quarterbacks in that room right now. You brought in a transfer, and then nobody transferred out at the end of the spring. And I know that some people are worried, well, if you move CJ Carr up on the depth chart, then you're going to guarantee that, Kenny Minchey transfers or whatever. Look, someone's going to transfer at some point, and you're going to have to look. You're not going to keep all of them. You're just not. When that happens, I don't know. Now, it's going to be what kind of makes things interesting is the NCAA hasn't made this official yet, but they're talking about getting rid of that spring transfer portal window. So if you're going to transfer, it's got to be in the winter now. How does that affect things? But I think that CJ Carr is okay for right now where he is, because you do have more experienced quarterbacks in front of him, but it just seems like kind of a weird little tightrope that they're walking with this thing. Like going back to when they went to New York with the media and they took the backup quarterback, Steve Angeli, with them out there along with Riley Leonard, even though he's a New Jersey guy and all this different stuff. I don't know. Jeff was asking the question, someone brought up the question in We In, We Out, would Steve Angeli win all the rest of the games? Would CJ Carr win all the rest of the games? No. I don't think he would either. I think that he would win a pretty good majority of the games because he has a better feel and a better willingness, really compared to both Leonard and Steve Angeli, what we've seen from both, more willingness to pull the trigger downfield. But I think a true freshman, he's better off where he is probably right now. You would like to probably see him start to take more reps at some point during the season, but I don't know how you manage that because of, again, the fact that you've got two other scholarship quarterbacks in between him and Riley Leonard right now. I wouldn't want to have to be balancing all that. Would you?
No, I would not.
That would be the least fun, I think, of the whole thing, is figuring out how you do that. Okay. There's a chance that Josh Burnham, sounds like maybe a pretty strong chance that Burnham is going to miss this week's game with an ankle injury that he suffered last week. He's listed as questionable for the game. And if that happens, then you've got R.J. Oben as well as freshman Bryce Young behind R.J. Oben. And here's Marcus Freeman talking about Bryce Young.
We expect Bryce to be able to have some opportunities to help us. RJ's had a really good week of practice, and that's what we've needed him to do is to, really be healthy and have a great week of practice. And I'm confident he'll have a good game on Saturday. But Bryce is a guy that's continuously gotten better over the course of his time here, and he could be ready to go at any moment. But I would expect him at some point probably be in the game on Saturday.
He didn't play against Northern Illinois after he got a couple of snaps against Texas A&M. What is your confidence in that strong side defensive end position if Josh Burnham is out?
A 3 out of 10. I have not seen anything out of R.J. Oben. I thought he looked slow on film against NIU last week. I thought he did a bad job of setting the edge, and that's something that Marcus Freeman talked about, especially when the team is trying to, run those stretch veer type, run plays to the perimeter. Someone's got to set the damn edge and either force that guy to go horizontally, to the sideline or, force it back inside where the rest of your defense is at. And so, I need to see a lot out of R.J. Oben. And honestly, I thought Burnham has been playing better than R.J. Oben, even though he's listed as the second string. And so if Burnham goes down, it's kind of like, to me, the security blanket to R.J. Oben. And now you're relying on basically a true freshman, at that point. And so, I don't know. When did they maybe decide, is Traore maybe too small to play that true defensive end? Do you allow someone like Junior Tuihalamaka to get into that mix at some point because he's probably a more of a true strong defensive end than a Viper?
A little bit bigger body.
Yeah, a little bit stronger.
Haven't seen him at all so far on the other side.
Someone who can really, set the edge. But the whole R.J. Oben situation has been, in my opinion, a real letdown. It's a guy that got in the portal. Obviously he came over with Riley Leonard. You don't know what kind of influence Riley Leonard had on that as well. But, he didn't play like this with Duke. He was much more effective. I need to see a lot out of him. And again, I think Burnham has been outplaying him even as the second string guy. And so if he goes down, it's not a situation that I would feel good about.
Yeah, I mean, Sloppy Joe says trying to understand what they saw in Oben to give him the starting job because he looks slow out there. And Josh Burnham has clearly been the better, the best defensive end they've had on that side so far. And Oben does need to step up. It's time for him to kick it into gear. And when you look at the production that he had at Duke, it was better than what Javonte Jean-Baptiste had when he was at Ohio State. And they're both guys deep into their careers, and they've got about the same body type. JJB might have been just a little bit bigger, but they're pretty similar. And I think that might be kind of what they saw when they were looking at RJ Oben. It's like, wow, this is a similar guy. We got to see him, in action last year going up against Notre Dame's offensive line. They obviously felt pretty good about him, but we just haven't seen anywhere near that kind of production. And that's the biggest thing. As people have said, like, Oben needs to step up. He desperately needs to step up, especially in a game like this, because otherwise, I mean, they'll have to find other options if it doesn't happen. I'm sure they've been working other guys in there this week. An interesting one that has been mentioned this week is our Jason Onye, who played outside when he first came to Notre Dame, but he's beefed up and he's been, more inside. He did play that strong side defensive end last week. It was basically in, against kind of a jumbo package that Northern Illinois had, like bigger body personnel and stuff like that. And that's why they said they moved him out there. So it doesn't sound like they really consider him an option, but I would have to think, if you're ineffective with one guy and you've got to rotate some bodies, I would think that either Onye or Tui Alamaka would be the two who make the most sense, just as someone, even if
At the edge.
Just set the edge, hold, be strong. And I think that that's something that Onye could do for sure.
It takes me back to my sophomore high school days where, we played a team that basically was running a triple option at the time, Marion High School. And they asked me to be that defensive end position. And it's really hard because all you need to do is, one, set the edge, and two, in that kind of offense, you got to squeeze down the line if the play isn't going your way. You're just squeezing and kind of mirroring, basically, one, making sure there's no cutbacks, and two, if the quarterback keeps the ball, well, then that's your responsibility. So, to me, that true defensive end position is just it. To me, it's so much fundamentals. You just got to be able to do your job, and again, it's not the most sexy thing at the end of the day, but just set the edge and squeeze down that line of scrimmage. And I think if you can do that, then that's 75% of the battle at the end of the day, because they have, fast and talented linebackers behind them. They have safeties who can come down who are also good in the run game.
Exactly.
Just do your job, and don't allow the big play to break, essentially.
So, which side of the ball do you expect the best performance from this week, offense or defense?
I would have to go defense. I think the defense is the strong point of this team. Thought they were really good against Texas A&M. They caught a lot of flack this week because of that last drive and that big play that broke for the touchdown. And even Al Golden said, we were one drive short essentially. But in my opinion, you held a team to 16 points, and you have Mike Dimbrack as your offensive coordinator. You have a ton of talent offensively. Holding a team to 16 points should be enough at the end of the day. And I think there's going to be even more of a chip on the shoulder this week. I know Al Golden is going to refine some things, and they're just ultimately going to be better. So, I think a lot of people just expect this offense to click in one game. It never happens like that. I think the offense is going to be better this week, but it's going to be nowhere near perfect. But I definitely think they're going to be better. But the defense, to me, is just what you can rely on game in and game out.
Yeah, you're right. This is probably a softball, but look.
I think I gave good rationale to it, though.
No, I think you did. Look, again, like this to me, from a Notre Dame defensive standpoint and what they're seeing is somewhat similar. Now, the running back Maccabee is not bad. Carr, again, a guy who came into college with high expectations and high billing, but he only completed 58% through 8 interceptions last year in his only full season playing quarterback. But I don't think that he has. It's similar to Texas A&M in that he's a decent enough quarterback, but he doesn't have near enough overall skill talent, especially at the receiver positions around him in that matchup against Notre Dame's secondary. So I see this like if Purdue is going to be successful, they're going to have to pound it at Notre Dame. And they did have the most rushing yards in the Big Ten last year, but I don't see that being able to have the kind of success like Northern Illinois had last week. So I think it's the defense. I think they're going to give up a low point total again. Can the offense score 20 points this week? If the offense gets to 20, Notre Dame is going to win. I will guarantee that. Notre Dame and Purdue played every year from 1946 through 2014. Do you miss the yearly rivalry with the Boilermakers?
I do miss the yearly rivalry, and I'll give you a couple reasons why. First reason, I've said this before, I'm just going to echo it. Any rivalry that involves a trophy is a true rivalry to me. For those who who don't know, I'll give you a quick history lesson real quick. The Shillelagh is the trophy I'm speaking about that basically travels between Notre Dame and Purdue, and that started in 1957 when an Irish merchant seaman, Joe McLaughlin, brought over the trophy. And so since 1957, there has been a trophy to, basically awarded to the winner of the game. I love those type of games. I love those type of rivalries. I think, it means more when you have a traveling trophy. And then, to get into more kind of like a serious response here, at the same time, I would much rather Notre Dame pick up this rivalry and kick a team like Miami of Ohio or NIU to the curb, because if you lose to Purdue, at least it's a Big Ten team. And to me, it's not nearly as embarrassing. But when you lose to someone like NIU, a MAC team, someone that you're supposed to roll over, as your home opener, it's a lot worse of a loss on paper, right? And you're going to get a lot more national attention for a loss to NIU compared to Purdue. And so if we can bring back a good, long-standing traditional rivalry game, kick out one of those MAC opponents, then one, it should theoretically boost your strength of schedule. And two, if you lose to someone like Purdue, it's not nearly as bad as losing to someone like NIU.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Where to begin? I don't miss the particular year in, year out with Purdue, because like living in this town with as many Purdue fans as there are around here, I mean, look, they've got stepchild syndrome and they can get just nasty about it. And that's what I don't miss, is just like the constant, the chip on their shoulder fan crap. And, like Joe Tiller probably played into it back in the day as well, when he was still around, when they were playing every year. That's what I don't miss about Purdue. I do miss having some of these rivalry games. And I think that I got this started up. I agree with Andrew. I miss,
give me a nice rotation.
Michigan State could be pretty nasty as well, but I do miss Michigan State and Michigan more than Purdue. And you're absolutely right. Like if you did like a 6-year rotation where it was like home and home Michigan State, home and home Michigan, home and home Purdue, and then you rotated back through it again, I think that would be great, actually.
You can even add Ohio State in there, just regionally Big Ten teams that you can just keep cycling between. And again, it's just much better for the fans. It's much better for your schedule. I just don't really see a downside of it. And if we're being completely honest, like Michigan State and Purdue, what have they done in a long time? It's not like you're giving yourself this overly dominant, like this isn't the early 2000s when Michigan State was good and when Drew Brees was playing for Purdue. Like it's not those type of teams anymore, right? And so I think you can take advantage of the kind of, the current status or the current, performance of some of these programs at the end of the day.
Yeah. Those schedules were different back. I mean, I know that like everyone
those were heavy Big Ten.
Yeah. Like you look at the schedules now versus back then, and they definitely looked a lot different. I just always felt like having, now Michigan was never annually on there, but Purdue and Michigan State were, and there was a healthy dose of even Pittsburgh and Boston College. And I just felt like by having so many of those long-standing rivalries on there, those games always meant more to the other thing to the other team than they meant for Notre Dame. And I felt like it was hard for Notre Dame to get up to the same level week in and week out the way those opponents were getting up for them. So I wouldn't want them all on the schedule at the same time, but I do like the idea of a rotation.
Andrew beat me to this. I do agree. Jonathan Smith is going to, get Michigan State back to more of their kind of, regular 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, and maybe kind of a really good season every fourth or fifth season. But I mean, Michigan State's been kind of bad for a while now, right? But I do think that they're on the right track of kind of recovering.
Well, they had that 1 year, and then they gave their coach a big contract.
Yeah,
and look how that worked out. Yeah, really good decision. Really good judge as a character, apparently. Which team do you feel more differently about right now compared to 2 weeks ago? Florida State, USC, or Notre Dame?
I'd just have to go with Notre Dame. I think Florida State has more of a proven, they're more consistent in their bad play than Notre Dame is in really good play and then really bad play. It's like an up and down roller coaster, right? I think USC is more streamlined as well. Like I expected them to have, listen, their head coach is Riley Leonard. It's still USC. They still get good quarterbacks and good wide receivers. Lincoln Riley. They're going to be good offensively. The only thing that surprises me is I think they've actually recovered some on defense this season. I think they're moderately better, which goes a long way with how bad they were, in the past couple seasons. So to me, it has to be Notre Dame to go from winning a type of game like they did against Texas A&M on the road in that environment, and then to coming home and laying an egg like that against NIU. I just think it's two completely different games, and ultimately, I didn't expect the offense to look this bad 2 consecutive weeks as well.
It's got to be Notre Dame for me as well, because look, we all felt like they were legitimate college football playoff contenders a week ago with a chance to grow into national championship contenders. But all bets are off the table right now. We're really trying to figure out what they are, because even for a Florida State team with a couple of losses, they still lost conference games. Like those were ACC games. So like at least you can kind of not write them off, but you can justify them to some extent. They were against Power 5 teams and in your conference. USC, nice win over LSU. I'm not completely sold. I want to see exactly what they're going to be once they get into Big Ten play for the first time, just how physical they can actually be with somebody. So it's Notre Dame for me as well. It would go Notre Dame, Florida State, USC would be my ranking in terms of how differently I feel about them. Yeah, it's a good point, Jeff. Notre Dame had fewer question marks in those teams coming into the season and a lot of returning talent with a good schedule. So I agree. It's got to be Notre Dame. Is Northern Illinois more likely to run the table this season or lose 4 games like Marshall did 2 years ago?
I'm going to be optimistic, but also rational at the same time. I want Northern Illinois to run the table. We all obviously, if they can go on and be the Group of 5 champion and make the playoff, that is, best case scenario. But they have a good amount of work ahead of them. But if you look at their schedule, I don't think it's totally unattainable. I think, to me, their ceiling at this point, their floor is 8-4. And their ceiling could be upward of, 11-1, 10-2 potentially, right? I think if you look at their schedule, the hardest teams that they have left are NC State, who isn't looking quite as good as I think people thought. And I think that's an interesting matchup that'll happen not this week, but next week. And then I think Toledo, just because they're always the top of the MAC. And then Miami of Ohio, really, because they just won the MAC last year, but they're off to an 0-2 start themselves, right? And so, again, I think this is a team that ranges from 8-4 to 10-2, but I'm going to lean more so on the 10-2 side, because I do think, based off what I saw, they're a really well-coached team. They know how to go out and execute a game plan. And I think that this type of win kind of gives them the confidence that they could need for the rest of the season to say, you know what, we can go toe-to-toe with anyone, right? It doesn't matter who we're playing against. We've proven to ourselves that we can win some of these tough, big games.
Miami's just 0-1, but their losses to Northwestern. So it's okay, well, look, they lost to a Power 5 team, but look at Northern, you want the answer to be they're going to run the table. You look at Marshall a couple of years ago, they quickly became everyone's darling, just like Northern Illinois has become. The curious part about this whole thing, Purdue had a bye last week, the week before playing Notre Dame. Northern Illinois got its bye this week. They're not going to play this weekend, so they can kind of ride that emotion a little bit, but then how are they going to deal with it once they come back? And I think that maybe that catches them a little bit of a break, that they didn't have to turn around in a week's time and play right away. But you're right. NC State should be the toughest team that they play the rest of the way. But I think it's more likely that they lose 4 games than run the table. I don't think that they will end up running the table. I think that they'll kind of get caught up in this whole thing, and I wouldn't be surprised if they lose a couple of games in a row somewhere along the way.
The stinky thing about this and what kind of probably played to Northern Illinois' advantage, but will kind of maybe trip them up down the road is they got the advantage of playing. And again, this is not an excuse. Notre Dame should have won this game no matter what. But I think it's a lot easier to pull off something like this early in the season when there's not a lot of tape out there.
Right.
I think Notre Dame, yes, they can game plan, but you don't know to the extent of what it's easier to game plan for a team when there's eight games of film compared to, 1 week of film. Right. And I think that goes the same way for NIU defensively for doing what they did against Notre Dame, because Notre Dame only had one tape out there. And instead of maybe trying to mix things up or add some wrinkles, I think Northern Illinois just kind of looked at the Texas A&M game and were like, hey, these are the things we need to do well. And if we can execute, we can win this game, essentially, right? And so I think that ultimately is what's going to hurt Northern Illinois as the season goes on, because more of that kind of, again, what I would say gimmicky kind of stuff, right? Like it's more on tape, and it allows defensive coordinators to also see what other teams did to successfully
they
stop
can start
it.
preparing for it. That's exactly right. And that is part of the deal when you play these early season games, is you're going to see some stuff that hasn't been put on tape before. And again, I do think Notre Dame should beat Purdue. I like, my gut tells me it's going to be a relatively close game, until Notre Dame figures out some things offensively, which we'd covered pretty extensively this week and here today as well. But there is, Purdue's only played one game, and it was against Indiana State. So there's a pretty good chance that they're going to try to throw some stuff out there that Notre Dame hasn't seen before, considering they have only played one game, and they won that game very handily, 49-0 over Indiana State. So I think that there's going to be some stuff that Al Golden hasn't seen so far on tape. So Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, and San Diego State are going to join Oregon State and Washington State in the Pac-12, beginning with the 2026-27 academic year. What do you think of this move?
Yeah, I think this is a smart move. I believe, when we were kind of having this conversation last year and kind of maybe deciding what would happen with the Pac-12, will it eventually disintegrate and fold into, the group of five / the Power Four, or do they find other teams that regionally make sense to kind of join them and form this new sort of, Pac-12, right? And I think Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, San Diego State are all programs that kind of fit geographically and also, fit for teams that I think have developed into kind of solid, football programs over the last few years, right? Like even, BCS era Boise State made a run. And I think Colorado State is, developing as a program as well. Like look at what Fresno State did against Michigan in that game week 1. Like they had Michigan on the ropes. I don't think that any of these programs, I guess, are a slack. And I know San Diego State has been a team that's always kind of on the edge of the top 25, even though they're not in a group of 5 conference. A Power 5 conference when the Power 5 was still around. So I think it makes sense. And I am I'm excited to see, what the Pac-12 kind of develops into now, how they redefine or remold their conference.
Yeah. I don't know how excited I am about this. There's 6 teams in the Pac-12. Like, I guess it's better than nothing if you're Oregon State and Washington State, how much stature it's actually going to give you. Like everyone probably would have loved to have Boise State a few years ago. Like Jeff is saying, I think Cal and Stanford should return now. Makes sense for them because the ACC is going to implode. I mean, I don't think the ACC is going to implode because the buyout is still there. If anything, the ACC added these 2 teams to help kind of protect themselves from imploding should either Clemson or Florida State actually be able to work their way out or, pay the money to get out. Cal and Stanford, part of the reason for, like why, like Cal and Stanford made this move to the ACC, one, to save themselves. They had some other options, but they, like the academic thing is part of what has prevented teams like Boise State, for example, from coming into the Pac-12 in the past. Cal and Stanford want to keep, like their academic standing, and at the end of the day, they just feel like they're too good for some of these other schools. So I don't think they're going to return to the West until, like maybe they do get through this year, the next couple of years, and go, man, we're really tired of all this travel out to the East Coast. Yeah. And, so maybe that does push them back there. But, at least for now, based on what they've always kind of tried to prop themselves up with before, I don't think they're going to make that move. This is a good one from Tommy. It's the State University Conference, or the SUC for short, SUC. Dang. I like that. Not bad. I do think it's a new Group of Five conference, basically. And Stymie says the Pac State Conference. Not bad. Didn't get this question in earlier from Brent. I forgot that I had this in here. Was the A&M win, was A&M a better win, or was NIU a worse loss?
Sorry, my dog was literally, you would think that we were being broken into. I would say that the NIU is a worse loss than the A&M win. I think if you flip it, and Notre Dame lost to A&M but beat NIU, there would be a lot more kind of like the national conversation would be, well, Notre Dame didn't quite beat A&M. That was kind of expected because remember, they were the underdog in that game, right? I think it is way worse to come home and lose and lay an egg like they did against NIU. And I think if we're talking playoff chances, all things considered, Notre Dame would have a better chance if those losses were reversed as well. So I have to go with the NIU loss being worse.
I am as well. I mean, you still beat an SEC team on the road in that environment. Everybody wrote you off, and then you lost to a MAC team. So I think NIU has to be worse. Question from Andrew: do we think that the Pac-12 would try to pick off some AAC teams or Sun Belts? An interesting question. Like how much do they care about geography? Because like most of the Sun Belt is so far out to the east. I mean, you do have some Texas schools and Louisiana schools in there. Tulane from the AAC would probably make some sense because you do have, like New Orleans, and you've got some academics there. Again, like I don't know how much that even matters anymore, but at least in terms of it was a school that was just in a New Year's Six bowl a couple of years ago, so it would, like that would make a little bit of sense. But really, you start adding all these different, I realize you need some numbers and stuff like that, but I do think at some point it just becomes an overglorified Group of Five. Like how seriously are they even going to be taken? What kind of stature?
I don't know though.
Are the other Power Four conferences going to give them?
I truly believe with the portal, these things are going to level out. There's always going to be an opportunity for some of these guys to be a starter somewhere, and even if that means going to a school like Fresno State, Boise State for a year or two, and then hitting the portal again to go back to maybe a more big time school. But it's just like Idaho, right? Like I saw this quote the other day and said, if you come to play to Idaho, why not come for 2 years instead of one? Because after your first year, you're probably going to get hit up, in the portal and get, maybe like $100,000 in terms of NIL money. But if you wait and have another good year, then that paycheck's going to get even bigger by the time some of those schools come knocking. And so again, I just think with the transfer portal and NIL, and it's just kind of, we're just getting into this new beast of both of those things. I just truly believe that, some of these, lesser colleges or, non-power 4 or 5, whatever you want to say, schools that were kind of more so looked down upon, I think that the playing field is going to become more equal, especially as things go on. And so, I don't buy it as, basically, these things kind of disintegrating or turning into maybe a lesser of a conference? Because I do think a lot, like some of these teams are going to start to get better or at least be more competitive.
Well, they're going to have to, just by the fact that they're going to be moving into conferences, and they're going to have like competition and all that kind of stuff. Sloppy Joe says Eastern Washington maybe makes the jump up. That could be an option for them. I mean, they're going to want to get more teams in there at some point. How selective they are, where they come from, all that kind of stuff. At least it's a move for them right now. 6 is better than 2, so at least they'll have 6 teams here in the very near future. And of course, the Mountain West is not going to be very happy. They're going to be cashing their big checks, because I think it's like an $18 million buyout to get out of the Mountain West, which is still a much more feasible check than anyone in the ACC would have to pay to get out right now. Well, that's going to do it. I told you we had a lot to cover today, and I think we covered
nearly 2 hours worth.
Yeah, I think we covered quite a bit of it. So good stuff. Don't forget, IB Countdown to Kickoff will come your way tomorrow night. We record tomorrow afternoon, and we will have it up. I think I had it posted, a little after 7 o'clock, maybe something like that, right around 7 last week. So hopefully in that ballpark, as long as we don't have any complications. Thank you very much, gents and ladies who might be out there as well. Jesse switching from Paul Skeens to his Cody Bellinger hat, just as the show ends. Appreciate everybody for being here, and we will talk to you later. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game on Saturday. And again, IB Countdown to Kickoff comes your way Friday night. So look for it dropping, whether it's on YouTube or your podcast platforms as well. Also, there's a bonus coming your way on YouTube tonight on the Irish Breakdown YouTube channel, and in the podcast, there is an interview with Purdue insider Nathan Baird. We covered some of the Purdue stuff, so you will find that there on both podcast and YouTube. Jesse, I will talk to you later. Everybody else, thanks again. Hit the like button before you leave. IB Nation Sports Talk.